Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe and turn on notifications. Genevieve and I marked our third wedding anniversary on an ordinary Thursday in September. We lived in a two-bedroom apartment downtown, the kind of place that seemed perfect for a young couple building a life together. I worked as a financial analyst. I had a stable routine, and I appreciated the predictability that came with being in a relationship, a partnership. Genevieve was a graphic designer, creative, outgoing, but always balanced. She was my balance. Of course, we had our differences, but we worked well as a team. We were a unit, until Sloan entered the picture. Or rather, until Sloan's marriage ended. Sloan had been Genevieve's friend since college. They'd met during a design project and stayed in touch over the years, meeting occasionally for lunches and coffee. Benign stuff. The kind of friendship that exists comfortably in the background of a marriage. Sloan's divorce, however, was anything but benign. It was quick, and it was bitter. Her husband had cheated, and she'd found out in the worst possible way, through messages he'd left open on his computer. Genevieve was devastated for her friend. I mean, truly heartbroken. She spent days talking to her on the phone, offering support, listening to endless rants about betrayal and disillusionment. I'd come home from work and find her on the couch, phone pressed to her ear, a pained expression on her face. "I know, Sloan. I know, he's trash," she'd murmur, her voice full of empathy. I completely understood the situation. I even encouraged it. "You should be there for her," I told her one evening, rubbing her shoulders as she finally hung up the phone. "That's what friends do during tough time." And I meant it. I really did. The problem started when that support turned into something entirely different. Sloan decided the best way to get over her divorce was to rediscover herself. That meant going out to clubs, meeting new people, and embracing the freedom she felt she'd lost during her marriage. And Genevieve, in a gesture of solidarity, decided to join her on this journey. The first time she said she was going out with Sloan, I thought it was fine. It was a Friday night. She deserved to have some fun with her friend. I stayed home, watched a few episodes of a show I'd been following, and waited for her to come back. It felt normal, healthy, even. Genevieve got home around 2 in the morning. I woke up to the sound of the door opening, the soft click of the lock. I asked how it went. She was excited, more animated than I'd seen her in weeks. She told me they'd gone to a new club downtown. The music had been great. Sloan seemed to be doing better, even laughed a few times. So far, so good. But the second outing happened the following Tuesday. A work night, then again on Thursday, and then again on Saturday. In less than 3 weeks, what was supposed to be occasional support had become a fixed routine. Genevieve was going out with Sloan at least 4 times a week, always coming home late, always with the same excuse, delivered with a pleading look in her eyes. "She needs me right now, Ronan. You get it, right?" And for a while, I tried to. I really did. I'm a patient man. I like to think I'm a reasonable man. I told myself this was a phase, a temporary, chaotic period of supporting a friend in need. But something started bothering me, something that went beyond the late nights and the smell of smoke and perfume that clung to her clothes when she came home. It started when I saw her social media posts. Genevieve had always been active on Instagram, but the photos she began posting were different. They were loud, desperate, almost dancing way too close to unfamiliar men, drinks in hand, wide, forced smiles. One caption read, "Living my best life." My best life. The words echoed in my head. Was I not a part of that? Was this life we had built together, in our quiet apartment, not good enough? I felt a tightness in my chest when I saw a particular video. It was a story, so it would disappear in 24 hours, but the image was burned into my mind. Genevieve was on a dance floor, the lights flashing in strobes of blue and pink. She was grinding against a man I'd never seen before, a complete stranger. His hands were on her waist, not casually, firmly. The music was a heavy, throbbing bass line, and Sloan was filming it all, laughing from behind the camera, a sound that felt more like a jeer than genuine joy. She clearly thought it was the coolest thing ever. I watched it 5 times. Each time, a cold knot formed in my stomach. I waited for her to get home that night. It was 3:30 a.m. when she finally opened the door. I was awake, sitting on the couch in the dark, my phone in my hand. The video was still open. She stumbled in, the scent of alcohol, and a dozen mixed perfumes hitting me like a wave. "Ronan," she whispered, her voice slurred. "You're still up? We need to talk," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence of the apartment. She stopped, took off her shoes, and looked at me with an expression I knew well. It was the look that said she already knew what was coming, and was already preparing her defense. "About what?" she asked, feigning innocence. "About this." I held up the phone, the video playing on a silent loop. "About how you've been acting. About these constant outings. About the posts you're putting up." She sighed, a long, dramatic sound. She tossed her bag onto the couch and crossed her arms. "Ronan, seriously? Are you really starting this now? You're dancing with other men in a way that makes me uncomfortable, Genevieve. And everyone's seeing it on your social media." She rolled her eyes. The gesture was so dismissive it felt like a slap. "Uncomfortable? Ronan, I'm just dancing. It's just fun. You're being insecure." The word, insecure, it hurt more than I expected. It was designed to hurt, to shut me down. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'm being honest about how I feel. If you were dancing like that with me, it would be one thing. But there's strangers. General." "Oh my God," she scoffed. "Do you hear yourself? You're trying to control me." "I'm asking for respect," I countered, my voice rising slightly. "I'm asking you to consider how this makes me feel. Your husband." She let out a sarcastic laugh, a sound I had never heard from her before. It was ugly. "You know what your problem is, Ronan? Toxic masculinity. That's exactly what you're showing right now. You want to trap me, control me, dictate what I can or can't do. It's pathetic." I was silent for a few seconds, processing what I'd just heard. Toxic masculinity. She'd really thrown that term at me. Like a weapon. A conversation-ending grenade designed to leave me speechless and ashamed. "So that's it," I said, my voice flat. "Any concern I express is toxic masculinity. If the shoe fits," she replied, grabbing her bag and heading to the bedroom. The conversation was over. She had declared it so. That was the first of many conversations just like it. They all ended the same way, with Genevieve dismissing my feelings, playing the victim, and painting me as the controlling, insecure villain. I tried different approaches. I tried being gentle. I tried being direct. I tried being understanding. But the result was always the same. She kept going out, she kept posting, and she kept saying I was the problem. It was on a Thursday night, after yet another frustrating, circular argument, that I made a decision. I was sitting on the couch, the apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Genevieve had stormed off to the bedroom an hour earlier after I'd questioned why a quick drink with Sloane had turned into a 5-hour excursion. I realized then that words were useless. My feelings were irrelevant to her. My perspective was, in her eyes, a symptom of some deep-seated flaw in my character. If she thought dancing intimately with strangers was completely normal and acceptable in a relationship, then I needed to test that logic. I needed to show her, in practical terms, how absurd it sounded. I needed to hold up a mirror to her behavior, one so clear she couldn't possibly ignore it. I grabbed my phone. My thumb hovered over the App Store. My heart was pounding. It felt like a betrayal, even though my intentions were purely strategic. I downloaded a dating app, the most popular one. I created a simple profile, uploaded a few recent photos, filled in the basic info, and then I wrote a single, crucial line in my bio: married, but exploring options. Honesty. It had to be honest. This wasn't about cheating. This was about making a point. The idea was to provoke a reaction to make Genevieve understand that if her behavior was acceptable, then so was mine. If her logic held true, then she couldn't possibly have a problem with this. I sat there, staring at the screen. It felt surreal. In less than 2 hours, my phone started buzzing. And buzzing. And buzzing. I had already received dozens of messages. Women interested, curious, some even flirting openly. I replied to a few, keeping things light and non-committal, just testing the waters. But one message in particular caught my attention. It was the digital equivalent of a bucket of ice water to the face. The name was Paige, the same Paige who was close friends with Genevieve and Sloane, the same Paige who'd been at some of those club outings, the same Paige who always commented on Genevieve's posts with fire emojis and words of encouragement like "Yes, Queen, live your truth." Her message read, Hey Ronan, what a surprise to see you here. Everything okay with you? I stared at that message for a long time. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Paige knew I was married to Genevieve. They were friends. And yet, there she was, on a dating app, messaging me. It was so hypocritical it was almost comical. A slow, cold anger started to build inside me. This wasn't just Genevieve anymore. This was an entire ecosystem of toxic solidarity, a group of friends who enabled and encouraged this destructive behavior, all under the guise of female empowerment. I replied, "Hey, Paige, all good. Just trying out this whole meeting new people thing, you know." Her reply came back almost instantly. "Oh, I get it. Things with Genevieve?" I typed back, "You could say that. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I left the conversation there. I didn't need to say another word. The trap was set. I knew, with absolute certainty, that it would eventually reach Genevieve's ears. And I was right. 2 days later, on a Saturday afternoon, she stormed into the apartment like a hurricane. She had just come from lunch with Paige and a few other friends. Apparently, news of my profile was already circulating through their gossip network. She threw her bag on the kitchen table with a loud thud and marched straight to the bedroom where I was working on my laptop. "You're on a dating app," she yelled. She was holding her phone up like it was criminal evidence. Her hand was shaking. I closed my laptop and looked at her calmly. "I am. How dare you? How dare you do this to me?" "Do what, exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Meet new people? Interact with other women? I thought that was normal. You yourself said I was being insecure for being bothered by your dancing." Genevieve opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. She was sputtering. This is completely different." "How?" I pressed, standing up to face her. "Explain it to me, Genevieve, because from my perspective, you're being a hypocrite." "I was dancing," she shrieked. "You're literally cheating." "Cheating?" I took a step closer. "You danced pressed up against other men, let them put their hands on you, and then posted it all over social media for everyone to see. And when I told you it bothered me, you called me insecure and controlling. But now that I'm doing something equivalent, suddenly it's cheating." "Equivalent? Equivalent? Ronan, you're talking to other women on a dating app, and you were letting other men put their hands on your body while dancing. How is that different? Tell me." She was shaking with anger, her face blotchy and red. "You're a miserable bastard, and you're a hypocrite," I replied, my voice cold. "But you know what's funny? Paige is on the app, too. And she messaged me. Your friend, Genevieve, the one who was there with you at all those clubs." Her face went pale, then bright red. She was speechless. I knew I'd hit a crucial point. I continued, "If you think what I'm doing is cheating, then you need to admit that what you were doing was, too. You're applying double standards, and you know it." She took a step back, her eyes welling up with tears. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage. "I hate you. You hate that I'm showing you the truth," I said quietly. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door. I heard her call someone, probably Sloan, and start venting loudly. I could make out fragments of the conversation. "He's on an app, yeah, a dating app. I know. He's trash." I was strangely calm. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control of the situation. I'd turned the tables using the same twisted logic she had been applying, and now she was facing the cognitive dissonance it created. What I hoped for, what a small, naive part of me still hoped for, was that this would lead to a real conversation, one where we could finally lay everything on the table and sort things out like adults. But the opposite happened. 3 days later, Genevieve created her own profile on a dating app. She posted provocative photos, added a bio that read, "In an open relationship, living with no regrets," and started openly interacting with other men. Worse still, she began showing it to me, as if it were some kind of revenge. "Look at this," she said during a tense, silent dinner, shoving her phone screen in my face. 50 matches in 2 hours. Seems I'm way more popular than you." I looked at the screen, then at her. "My wife. Do you really think this is going to fix anything?" "It fixes it for me," she sneered. "If you can do it, so can I." "Genevieve, when I did this, it was to show you how absurd your logic was. You're doing this because..." "Why? Revenge?" "I'm doing it because I can," she shot back. "Because I'm free, and if you have a problem with that, then you're the insecure one here." Things spiraled completely out of control when she decided to make it all public. She posted a photo on Instagram with the caption, "In an open relationship and have never felt freer. Number no regrets. Number my truth." The post showed her smiling, phone in hand, displaying the dating app. Her friends flooded the comments. Sloan, of course, commented, "That's the spirit. You deserve it all." But there were also comments from people who knew us as a couple, and they were confused. My cousin asked, "Wait, you're in an open relationship? Since when?" My phone buzzed with messages from friends and family, asking what was going on. I had to explain, repeatedly, that it was a complicated situation, that we were having problems. The apartment became a silent battlefield. We barely spoke. When we crossed paths in the kitchen or living room, there were only cold stares and cutting remarks. She spent even more time away from home, now openly saying she was seeing other people. I buried myself in work, staying extra hours at the office just to avoid being home. I was exhausted, tired of the drama, tired of the hypocrisy, tired of living in a toxic environment where I was constantly painted as the villain. The relationship was over. I knew it. We were just living among the wreckage. I was at work when I got the message from Reese. He was a neighbor who lived 3 floors down. We'd exchanged greetings in the elevator, chatted briefly about the local football team, but had never developed a close friendship. So, when the notification popped up on my phone with his name, I was surprised. The message read, "Dude, sorry I have to show you this, but I thought you should know." Below the message was an attached video. My hands felt cold as I tapped to open the file. What I saw made my stomach turn. It was Genevieve. She was at a bar I recognized, just 2 blocks from our apartment. She was sitting on a high stool, talking to a man with dark hair and a blue dress shirt. They were laughing. She was touching his arm, intimately. And then, after a few seconds, they kissed. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a long, deliberate kiss, with no hesitation. It was a kiss between 2 people who were comfortable with each other. A kiss that left no room for misunderstanding. I watched the video 3 times. Each time, a desperate part of my brain hoped to see something different. Some angle that would prove it was all a mistake. But it was undeniable. My wife was kissing another man in a public bar, and my neighbor had filmed the whole thing. I replied to Reese, "Thanks for letting me know." He sent another message. "If you need anything, just say the word. I know things must be rough right now." I thanked him again and put my phone away. I sat at my desk for a few minutes, staring at my computer screen without really seeing anything. The anger I expected to feel took a while to come. In its place was something colder, more calculated, an absolute, crystal clarity about what needed to be done. There was no more gray area, no more testing logic. This was the end. I opened a new browser tab and started researching rental laws in our state. The apartment was only in my name. The lease had only my signature. Genevieve had never been officially added, a step I'd planned to take but never got around to because of pure procrastination. Now, that procrastination had become an advantage. According to the law, I had the right to ask anyone living in the apartment but not on the lease to leave, as long as I provided a formal 30-day notice. I saved all the relevant information. At the end of my workday, I stopped by a law office on my way home. The lawyer who met with me, a middle-aged man named Richard, listened carefully to the situation. I showed him the lease, explained that Genevieve had been living with me but that the relationship had ended and that I wanted to formally request her departure. "It's pretty straightforward," Richard said, his tone matter-of-fact. "You have the legal right to ask her to leave. I'll prepare the document for you. I recommend using a process server for official documentation." I agreed to everything. I paid the initial fee and left the office with a strange sense of determination. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my life instead of just reacting to her chaos. When I got home that night, Genevieve was in the living room with Sloan. They were watching some reality show and laughing loudly. I walked right past them, went into the bedroom she had finally unlocked it, grabbed some clothes and a pillow, and returned to the living room. "I'll sleep in the guest room," I said, more to myself than to them. Genevieve barely glanced in my direction. "Whatever." Sloan let out a little laugh and muttered something I chose to ignore. The next day, Richard called to say the document was ready. I left work early, picked up the legal notice, and hired the process server. I wanted everything done properly, with no loopholes she could exploit later. The delivery happened on a Friday night. I was home when the process server knocked on the door. Genevieve answered, confused by the uniformed man's presence. "Genevieve Morrison?" the server asked. "Yes, that's me. I have a legal notice for you." He handed her the sealed envelope. She took it, looked at me standing in the hallway, and opened the document right there. I saw the exact moment she understood what she was reading. Her face shifted from confusion to shock, then to pure, undiluted fury. "You're evicting me?" she screeched, her voice cracking. "You're evicting me? I'm formally requesting that you vacate the apartment in 30 days, I said, my voice steady. "The lease is only in my name. You're entitled to that period to find another place. You're a miserable bastard. How could you do this?" The process server, clearly used to this kind of reaction, said calmly, "Ma'am, the notice has been served. You have 30 days from today." He then turned and left. Genevieve stood there, holding the paper with trembling hands. "You really think you're going to get away with this?" "I already have," I replied. "The document is legal. You have 30 days. The following days were an emotional roller coaster, a war of attrition fought within the four walls of our apartment. Genevieve alternated between different strategies. Sometimes, she tried being nice. Manipulation, cloaked in sweetness. She'd cook my favorite dinner, leave sweet notes around the house, even attempt to start conversations about fixing things. But I saw right through it. I had the video. I knew it was a last, desperate attempt to avoid consequences. Other times, she was hostile. She'd deliberately break dishes, accidentally spilling coffee on my work shirts, or throwing my clothes on the floor. She would scream in the middle of the night just to wake me up, but I stayed firm. I documented every incident, took photos of any damage she caused, and kept everything recorded in a file on my computer. I was treating this like a business transaction. An ugly, painful one. The situation escalated when she decided to throw a party. It was a Thursday, and I had just gotten home from work when I found the living room full of people I'd never seen before. Loud music vibrated through the floorboards. Drinks were everywhere. People were smoking on the balcony. Genevieve was right in the middle of it all, laughing, clearly drunk. I recognized a few faces from her social media photos. Sloan, of course, was there too, along with Paige and a few other acolytes. "What's going on here?" I asked, having to shout over the music. Genevieve turned to me with a malicious smile. "I'm enjoying my home while I still can. Got a problem with that? It's a work night tomorrow." "Genevieve, turn the music down." "Or what?" she sneered, and a few of her new friends laughed. "You're going to evict me?" "Oh, wait. You already are." I looked around and realized arguing would be pointless. This was a performance for her audience. I pulled out my phone and recorded a short video of the mess, documenting the empty bottles, overflowing ashtrays, and stains on the couch. Then I went to the guest room, locked the door, and called the building's landlord, explaining the situation and making it clear the party had been her idea, without my consent. The party lasted until 3 a.m. When it finally ended, the apartment was trashed. Broken glasses, food stomped into the carpet, a burn mark on the coffee table where someone had left a lit cigarette. I took photos of everything. The next morning, I emailed her with all the evidence attached. "You'll be held responsible for all damages. I'll deduct repair costs from any remaining shared assets." Her mother, Lorraine, showed up a week later. She was a woman who always thought I was too cold, too serious for her spontaneous daughter. She walked right in without being invited. "Ronan, we need to talk about this ridiculous situation." "There's nothing to discuss, Lorraine. The decision's been made. You're kicking my daughter out of her home. She's devastated. She was devastated enough to throw a party here and cause thousands of dollars in damage," I said, my voice hard. "She was devastated enough to kiss another man in a bar. So, excuse me if I question how much she's really suffering." Lorraine turned red. "How dare you talk about my daughter like that? I'm stating the truth. And if you came here to convince me to change my mind, you're wasting your time." She slammed the door on her way out. The war extended to my professional life. A colleague who was friends with one of Genevieve's circles started spreading rumors around the office that I was emotionally abusive, that I controlled her, and was now using the apartment to manipulate her. The whispers followed me down the hallway. I scheduled a meeting with Human Resources, explained the situation, and informed them an employee was spreading defamatory information. 2 days later, the colleague was given a formal warning. The damage, however, was done. The 30 days somehow felt both fast and painfully slow. On the 29th day, she was still packing. I started to worry she'd try to drag things out, but on the final morning, a moving truck pulled up in front of the building. Genevieve, Sloan, and a couple of the guys I recognized from her Instagram posts loaded her boxes and furniture. When they finished, she stood in the doorway, looking at me one last time. Tears filled her eyes, but I had seen that trick before. She waited for me to say something, to offer one last chance. I remained silent. "You'll regret this," she finally said, her voice a hoarse whisper. I looked her straight in the eye. "I've regretted a lot of things, Genevieve, but letting you go will never be one of them." She walked out and closed the door. I heard her footsteps fading down the hallway, the sound of the elevator opening and closing, and then silence. I stood there, in the middle of the half-empty apartment, and for the first time in months, I took a deep breath without feeling a crushing weight on my chest. The divorce was surprisingly smooth. With the physical separation already settled and both of us wanting to close the chapter, the lawyers moved quickly. 6 months after she moved out, it was officially finalized. I received the signed papers on a Tuesday afternoon. I filed them away with all the other documents from that period and put everything in a box in the back of my closet. The official closing of a cycle that had been painful, confusing, and utterly exhausting. But with that closure came something unexpected, a deep, profound sense of relief. I realized I'd spent months living in a state of constant tension, always bracing for the next explosion, the next drama, the next accusation. Now, with her out of my life, I could finally relax. I could be myself without constantly being judged or attacked. I started rebuilding. I redecorated the apartment, replacing the furniture that reminded me of her, even painting the walls a different color. A calm, clean, slate gray. I returned to things I'd enjoyed but set aside during the marriage. Reading classic novels, going for long runs in the morning, watching old black and white movies she'd always hated. My space was my own again. My life was my own again. A few months after the divorce, I ran into her by chance at a cafe. She was with a guy I vaguely recognized from her social media photos. We locked eyes for a moment, and I gave a polite, neutral nod. To my surprise, she got up and came over to my table. "Hi," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "Hi, Genevieve. How are you?" "I'm good," she said, though her eyes told a different story. "And you?" "I'm good, too." An awkward silence followed. Then she said, "Look, I know things ended badly between us. And, I wanted to say, I get it now. Some of the things you said, they made sense. I was just too lost back then to see it." I nodded slowly. "I appreciate you saying that." "Are you happy?" she asked, a genuine question in her voice. "I am," I said, and I was surprised by how true it felt. "I'm happier than I've been in a long time." She smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I'm glad for you." She went back to her table, and I finished my coffee. When I left the cafe, I realized that encounter had been necessary. Seeing her again, having that brief, honest conversation, had been the final confirmation that I'd made the right choice. Sometime later, I ran into Lorraine, her mother, at a grocery store. I was paying for my groceries when I heard someone call my name. She was there, pushing a cart, looking at me with what I recognized as embarrassment. "Ronan," she said, approaching. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Sure, Lorraine." She took a deep breath. "I wanted to apologize for how I acted when you and Genevieve were separating. I was protecting my daughter, but I said things that weren't fair. I was surprised. I appreciate that." "Lorraine." She told me more about what really happened, about the things she did, and I realize now you were just trying to protect yourself. "You look good. Lighter." "I am," I smiled. "Take care, Ronan." "You too, Lorraine." That brief conversation brought another kind of closure, a realization that the truth always finds a way to surface, even with those who were once your staunchest critics. I learned deep lessons from that experience. I learned that setting boundaries in a relationship is not an act of control, but an act of self-preservation. That accepting less than you deserve is a form of self-betrayal. I learned that emotional manipulation can come in many disguises, even wrapped in the language of pop psychology, and that recognizing the patterns is the first step toward breaking free. Most importantly, I learned that respecting yourself is fundamental. For too long, I'd let Genevieve dictate the terms of our relationship, invalidate my feelings, and make me question my own sanity. But when I finally took a stand, when I decided my mental peace mattered more than keeping up appearances, everything changed. I understood that loving someone should never, ever mean losing yourself, that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, honest communication, and clear boundaries, and that when someone consistently disrespects those boundaries, the only healthy choice is to walk away. I looked at my life now and saw possibilities instead of obligations. I saw freedom instead of confinement. I saw hope instead of despair. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I had made the right choice. I had chosen myself when I needed to most, and that choice, as difficult as it had been, had saved my life.